Shravanam Diaries podcast.
Reading Bhagavad Gita as it is, the book by His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Chapter 9, The Most Confidential Knowledge. Are you ready? Jai. Text 1. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Idam tu te guhyatamam pravakshyamya suyate Jnanam vijnana sahitam yagyatva mokshase subhat. Yagyatva mokshase shubhat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence." Purport. As a devotee hears more and more about the Supreme Lord, he becomes enlightened. This hearing process is recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Quote, "The messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Godhead are discussed amongst devotees. This cannot be achieved by the association of mental speculators or academic scholars, for it is realized knowledge." This is so important to understand. You know why? I'll tell you why. We're not even discussing these so-called scholars who are studying the Shat-sandarbhas and studying the other Goswami literatures back in Harvard or wherever they do these religious studies. Even I think in UK, Oxford, somewhere they do these things. We're not even discussing those. I believe that this can be applied directly to us. That many times we can find ourselves that we are maybe studying the books, but we're not really applying the process nicely in our own life. And that makes us more of a scholar than a devotee, if you know what I mean. So we're more of a scholar, meaning we're more about reading and reading and reading and speaking, but we're not into practicing. But realization only comes when you practice. Jnana vijnana. Jnana means realized knowledge. How do you realize it? You can't realize knowledge just by talking about it for eternity. You can realize knowledge by applying it into your heart. Otherwise, we become mental speculators or academic scholars. Moreover, I remember my husband, he was saying that the Indian school system is basically, it's based on the fact that you have to swallow up information and then throw up on the paper, swallow up and throw up. But it's not how spiritual knowledge works at all. You take it, you honor the spiritual knowledge, then you digest it very nicely, and then you're able to nourish your spiritual life, and then you're able to speak and discuss. As here it says, these messages are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if they are discussed among devotees. The devotees are constantly engaged in the Supreme Lord's service. The Lord understands the mentality and the sincerity of a particular living entity who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and gives him the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna in the association of devotees. So it's very important. Mentality and sincerity. And then intelligence will come. That's why if we're not sincere and we're acting stupid, that means that it's just confirming the fact that we're not sincere. Yep. I'm talking like from my personal experience in my life. Yeah. Discussion of Krishna is very potent. And discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, then he will surely make advancement towards spiritual realization. Lord Krishna, in order to encourage Arjuna to higher and higher elevation in his potent service, describes in this 9th chapter matters more confidential than any he has already disclosed. The very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, the 1st chapter, is more or less an introduction to the rest of the book, and in the 2nd and 3rd chapters, the spiritual knowledge described is called confidential. This would be 2nd and 3rd. Topics discussed in the 7th and 8th chapters are specifically related to devotional service, because they bring enlightenment in Krishna consciousness. They are called more confidential. But the matters which are described in the 9th chapter deal with unalloyed devotional service. Unalloyed, pure devotion. Therefore, this is called the most confidential. One who is situated in the most confidential knowledge of Krishna is naturally transcendental. He therefore has no material pangs, although he is in the material world. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that although one who has a desire to render loving service to the Supreme Lord is situated in the conditional state of material existence, so we can still be conditioned in material existence, he is to be considered liberated. Similarly, we shall find in the Bhagavad Gita 10th chapter that anyone who is engaged in that way is a liberated person. Haribol! Now, this first verse has specific significance. The words idam jnanam, this knowledge, refer to pure devotional service, which consists of 9 different activities: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshipping, praying, obeying, maintaining friendship, and surrendering everything. Obeying. Okay, one second. Shravanam kirtanam Vishnu, smaranam padasevanam, archanam vandanam dasyam, sakyam atmanivedanam. Dasyam means obeying. Wow. Wow, that makes sense, but I've never heard of this English definition of dasyam. Yeah, it means, of course, servants obey. Okay, and wow. Okay. By the practice of these 9 elements of devotional service, one is elevated to spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness. When one's heart is thus cleared of material contamination, one can understand this science of Krishna. Simply to understand that a living entity is not material is not sufficient. That may be the beginning of spiritual realization, but one should recognize the difference between activities of the body and the spiritual activities of one who understands that he is not the body. In the 7th chapter, we have already discussed the opulent potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. his different energies, the inferior and superior natures, and all this material manifestation. Now, in chapter 9, the glories of the Lord will be delineated. The Sanskrit word anasuyate in this verse is also very significant. Generally, the commentators, even if they are highly scholarly, are all envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the most erudite scholars write on Bhagavad Gita very inaccurately. Because they are envious of Krishna, their commentaries are useless. The commentaries given by devotees of the Lord are bona fide. No one can explain Bhagavad Gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna if he is envious. One who criticizes the character of Krishna without knowing him is a fool. So such commentaries should be carefully avoided. For one who understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pure and transcendental personality, these chapters will be very beneficial. Jai. Yeah, actually, when we forget the Lord as a person, then we may be very, very scholarly or whatever, but it's laughable actually. Like one time I was listening to one astrological Zoom meeting, let's just say, and there were many these South Indian experts of astrology talking, non-devotees, I mean, trying to pick up the gold from any place. So, and they started discussing, they started off very interestingly about how Parashar Muni and other Munis, they used to observe the material world, and then they made some laws, and that became Jyotish, how they would come to Parvati Devi and discuss what would happen and which one of them would win, whose prediction would be. But then this speaker, who was supposedly the host, he started saying that yes, and all the planets, they're manifested from a particular Dasha Avatara. I'm like, yes. And then he's like, that's why if you have problems with Ketu, you have to feed the fishes. Or if you have problems with Jupiter, with Guru, then you have to, do some charity and feed the dwarfs. And then I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, where is Vamana Deva? Where is Matsya Avatara? There are shaligrams that are in the form of Matsya Avatara. Vamana Deva also, there are shaligrams in the form of Vamana Deva. Where did all that go? Now we have to go out and start looking for dwarves to take care of. And I'm not saying that he was wrong. I'm not saying that it's like, I'm not an expert. Feeding the fishes is also very, very good. But taking the God, like the Supreme Lord, out of his own Dashavatara, or not emphasizing it at all, I find that to be a little bit... So, Prabhupada's continuing. So even if they're highly scholarly, all are envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the most erudite scholars write on Bhagavad Gita very inaccurately. Because they're envious of Krishna, their commentaries are useless. The commentaries given by devotees of the Lord are bona fide. No one can explain Bhagavad Gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna if he is envious. One who criticizes the character of Krishna without knowing him is a fool. Actually, you can apply this anywhere. If you are trying to describe anybody without knowing them, you're a fool, or criticizing the character. That makes sense, no? Just like with anybody. I'll tell you, for example, that when we just moved to Mayapur, I was about 17, and I wanted to say daughter, my sister was about 9. We have like 8 years gap. So I was hanging around with my sister, and I'm 17, 18, and she's like 8 or 9. And the thing is that we were in Madhuri Kanamini Mataji's drama group, and over there were young mothers with kids, like my friend Ekanta, Yamuna Jivana. They're married, but they have a small kid already, because it's better to have kids younger in life. And I would be there with Vishaka. So at one point there was a rumor that I am also a single mother with a child, and Vishaka is my child. And I remember we were standing in the temple, and I was like, oh my god, they think that, Vishaka is my daughter. And Vishaka, she would like grab my hand and say, Mommy, it's like, because she likes to joke around. So yeah, if you would judge my character and criticize me for giving birth when I was a teenager and not even having a husband, you're an idiot, because I'm not married and she's my sister, so it's similar. So if you don't know who is Krishna and you criticize his character, then I'm sorry, you're a fool. That's why when there are people who are like, no, we're only Ram Bhaktas because Krishna, he's dancing with all the girls. Do you know that like out of 6 opulences, one of his opulences is that he's most detached? He's most detached. So yeah. Okay, so such commentaries should be very carefully avoided. For one who understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pure and transcendental personality, these chapters will be very beneficial. Text 2. One of my favorite verses. Wow, it has a long purport. Is it? Oh, it has such a long purport. Okay, if anything, we'll stop in the middle of the purport. Text 2. Raja Vidyam Rajaguhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyakshavāgamam Dharmyam Susukham Kartum Avyayam. This knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. It is everlasting, and it is joyfully performed. You have no idea how much this verse directed me in life. How important this verse is for me personally. First of all, is of course the glories of this knowledge as the king is just wonderful. That it's purest knowledge. It's like fantastic. But it gives direct perception of the self by realization, pratyakshavāgamam dharmyam, meaning you will have direct experience. You will experience Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is about experiencing it, and you can't like spend like 50 years, doing something in devotional service, thinking it's devotional service, and not having the experience of Krishna consciousness, basically. That means that, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say, you have to change your approach towards bhakti. There has to be a direct experience. You're going for kirtan and you're just sitting there like spacing out. You don't have the experience of the kirtan, but if you sit there and focus and apply yourself, you will have such a deep experience of the kirtan. And similarly, the next point, it is everlasting and joyfully performed. Susukham kartum avyayam. Susukham. You will be happy. If you're not happy in Krishna consciousness, you have to change your approach because something is wrong. The nature of this knowledge is that it's joyfully performed. joyfully. That's why, as much as I loved being in a drama group, I was in a drama group ever since I was like a kid, and I love Madhurya Kadamini Mataji, and I was in her drama group from the time I was 17 up to like 18. 17, 18. Well, actually, I joined when I was 16, so 3 years. But at one point I realized that, yeah, it's wonderful, but I'm getting older, and I realized that I'm not as happy as in the drama group as I was when I was a kid. That now I really want to pursue something that I like even more than drama, theater. So I began focusing more on my studies. I went for Bhakti Shastri, then somehow miraculously Samskaras course also were there, and then I went for Bhakti Purna Maharaj's classes, and then after that, of course, I got married, and then I continued my education in social media marketing and negotiations and voice design and other different, majors. So it is joyfully performed. Devotional service is meant to be performed happily. Yeah. Even though even a couple of months ago we went to Calcutta Ratha Yatra, we did do some dramas and dances. I was doing one drama also, that the Long Dream, one time, and it was great also. It's wonderful. The devotees were happy, the crew was happy, I was happy to perform in front of Lord Jagannath, but I'm not gonna focus my entire life on on theater, because I'm more happy in other areas of life. Yeah. Purport. This chapter of Bhagavad Gita is called the King of Education because it is the essence of all doctrines and philosophies, explained before. Among the principal philosophers in India are Gautama, Kanada, Kapila, Yajnavalkya, Shandilya, and Vaishvanara. And finally there is Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra. So there is no dearth of knowledge in the field of philosophy or transcendental knowledge. Now, the Lord says that this 9th chapter is the king of all such knowledge, the essence of all knowledge that can be derived from the study of the Vedas and different kinds of philosophy. It is the most confidential because confidential or transcendental knowledge involves understanding the difference between the soul and the body. And the king of all confidential knowledge culminates in devotional service. We'll stop here. Thank you so much for tuning in today. The book links, previous episodes timeline, and biography of the author can be found on shravanamdiaries.com. The link is in the description, and we shall see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna, Krishna